Alright, well let's come along and look at the stabilize module. So first thing we're going to do is import our clip again, and we are going to use walking with surfboard from our footage folder. Change my frame offset, won't cache the clip. There we go, 85 frames long, 25 frames a second, HD, no fields. And let's call this V001. Okay, and let's just play through our clip. So you can see it's a shot where the cameraman's walking, everything's a bit sort of shaky, but fundamentally, you know, it's a shot we need to use, we just need to get it a bit more stable. So what we're looking for in this particular shot is we are looking to stabilize out the camera movement. The other thing we could try and stabilize around is one of the girls here. Now, the thing to think about when we are looking to stabilize a shot is, where are we going to stabilize things? Are we going to stabilize it around a point in the background, or are we going to stabilize it around the point of interest here? So in this case, it's going to be the point of interest, which is going to be our two girls and the surfboard. So what I want to do now is create a new shape. New X-spline that will take in that. So we're just going to do a regular track. And we know what we're facing with this surfboard because we've done it in a different situation. I'm going to turn on auto channel, see what that gets us. Now, let's take a look at what sort of motion we want to track as well. We've got translation going on in the first bit. We've also then got rotation and scale going on here, and also shear as the surfboard moves closer towards us. Now, do we turn perspective on? That is the question. I would say yes, because we've got a flat surface that's moving. It's rotating enough in the y-axis that perspective is going to give us probably a better result. Large motion, yes. Search area will keep as default. Angle will keep at 0, as well as zoom for the time being. And let's track this forward. So just note really that I try and keep most of the... There we go. Let's just pause that for a second. One of the reasons that I don't change a lot of this stuff from the default is basically because you don't need to. My little philosophy is that, you know, if you don't need to sort of, you know, do a lot of hard work to get something working, then why bother doing it? So it's only when a problem happens that I would come in and change the search area and change the angle, as I've done in previous exercises. So, for example, here, there we go. At this bit here, we kind of got away with the girl's arm, the blonde girl's arm, coming up and through. That didn't seem to make a big deal of difference. A little bit there on the shape, so it made a little bit of difference there. But really, when the dark-haired girl's arm comes in, the shape starts moving and stretching all over the place. Now, what we could do is we could create a couple of tracking mats to go out all the way through here. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to retrack some of this. And I'm going to add another shape just around the nose of the board, and add a final shape around the opposite end as well. There we go. And I'm going to retrack this, and what this is going to let us do is it's going to let me shrink down this area and this shape a bit more, so I'm not so reliant on a smaller shape. Just make sure that the arm didn't impact that. There we go. Didn't, it's fine. So I'm watching out for it. I'm going to bring this shape in a little bit smaller here. Track it forward another couple of frames. And then bring this one in as well. So even though, I've made this shape smaller, because I've got the other ends here, that's kind of helping to counterbalance any of the problems. And because we've got perspective turned on, Mocha knows that these 3 sections here have all got a certain movement that they're going to be making. So here I can take this down a little bit, expand this one out a bit more. So it's always about getting as much information here as we can. Just helps create a much more accurate track. I'm just going to go back here a second, because we do have a lot of this arm coming in and it's going to start messing things up quite a bit soon. So I am going to have to create another layer, even if it's only for a few frames, just to create a little track mask there. So let's come over. I was too busy talking, I forgot to name these. So surfboard track, and this one is blonde arm track. I'm going to keep on with shear with that, the blonde arm, that's fine. And let's set the in point on that right there. Whoops. It's going to be a tricky one, so what I'm going to do is actually set a few keyframes to sort of help the tracker along. Or even, actually, I might not even track it. But we've already tracked a few frames here. So how do we get rid of those? Well, one way to do it, well, we can try to delete all the parameter keyframes. That's not going to do it because we don't have any keyframes set on any particular parameter. So there's no green buttons up here or green keyframes along the timeline for us to get rid of. So the only real way to do it is to come into our curve editor, find our layer, look at the track here, and let's turn the eye on there. Click on frame all, and that will show us all the keyframes we have. So now I'm going to come over here, just select them, hit delete. There we go. That's all of my tracking now disabled. So come back into the parameters, and all I'm going to do now with this one is just a really simple couple of keyframes. Bring that in there, rotate that around a little bit, drag these out, come to the next bit of motion, Apple A or Control A to select all, press and hold down W to rotate around. And that's almost there. There we go. It doesn't have to be too accurate because we're just using this as a track mat. Make sure that our tracking is turned off. We don't want it to overwrite and track that there. And let's come in and go back and retrack the rest of the surfboard. Cool. Seemed to work out. Let's check out how well it worked. And let's bring that over here somewhere, and this one following our stripe. Let's turn off the splines, turn on the grid. Can't see the grid when you come into your viewer prefs. I'm going to turn this up high enough so that we actually can see the actual stripes here, so I can get a better read of how things are working. That seems fine to me. Cool. Okay. So let's just play that backwards to make sure that everything's looking as it should do. And that seems to be working out quite nicely. There we go. Our line at the top is sticking exactly where it should do. Line at the bottom here with the gap between the light red and the darker red. That all seems to be working out nicely as well. Okay, so now we've got our track all sorted out, it's time to head to the Stabilize tab. Okay, and the first thing we'll see, let's just actually play it through just with the default settings. I'm going to turn the grid off because that's just going to get annoying. There we go, so we can already see exactly what it's starting to do anyway, and that's to stabilize out the frame. So obviously it's creating black borders at the sides where it's going out. Let's just hit stop on that, and let's go to a decent frame there. There we go. So let's look at the parameters for the Stabilize tab. We've got our regular input, so we've got the input clip, which is the clip we're going to use to do the stabilizing, and the clip to stabilize, which could be 2 different clips. We've got a range that we're going to stabilize, and by default this is going to be our entire range here, 1 to 86, and we can create an output clip as well. So just as we've got in the lens so just as we've got in the lens module, we can choose where we're going to output out our rendered frames if that's what we're going to do. Okay, so let's come back to stabilize. Didn't want to do that. So we're going to skip over fixed frames and come back to that later. We'll just take a look at what the smooth is doing here. So the smooth is the controls that are doing the stabilize for us. So let's take a little look. At the moment, we're stabilizing out the X and Y rotation. If I just stabilize out the X rotation, let's take a look at what the difference that makes. So that tries to just keep the surfboard horizontally aligned. Let's just do the Y translation, and that's keeping the surfboard vertically aligned. Now in this situation, this is not really the effect that we're wanting, but obviously in some situations it's actually quite good just to be able to just do the X or the Y. We can also do the rotation. And the zoom, which evens out the scale. So let's have a little look here, see what happens there. Obviously, as the camera goes closer in, it's going to be zooming out and creating a whole load of black around the edge. We can also even out shear and perspective. So really, this is going to get fairly extreme. And it's quite interesting to see what it's doing to stabilize all of this stuff out. But obviously, as it does get really extreme, especially at the edges, hang on, let's have a little look and stop it around about here. We're getting quite a large amount of distortion going on our girls. So let's look at the end frame. There we go. We've got our really skinny girls all of a sudden getting really, really huge with the perspective turned on. We'll turn the shear off as well. But that's just that just goes to show what, how far we can take this. Let's turn everything on now. I'm going to turn on maximum smoothing as well. See what difference that makes. Huge difference. Let's what maximum smoothing attempts to do is to make every frame identical to the first frame. So you can see here it's actually doing quite an interesting job on the surfboard. The surfboard hardly changes shape at all. In fact, it's remarkably steady. if we turn that off, we've got a number of frames here. And what this does is it starts to sort of, instead of creating a completely stabilized image, it creates a smoothing of the image instead. So when the number of frames is set down to 0, that means there's no smoothing going on at all. Now, if we bring that up just slightly, we're going to get a small amount of smoothing, and this is really useful for where we've got sort of small blips of quite wild motion going on. So say if our cameraman tripped over a rock, or all of a sudden decided to whiz the camera up in the air, so that would only affect those sharp bumps rather than taking out an average across a large number of frames. That's why as we turn this up, we're going to get closer and closer to our maximum smoothing. So this is set to 29 frames. So basically we're getting a very, very stable image, or an image where everything is pretty much still totally stabilized. And as we bring that down, we're taking out some of the nasty bumps and bruises, but we are not making sure the surfboard stays in exactly the same position. So it's a way of keeping in some of the native camera movement while taking out some of the nasty bumps. So even when that's set to 5, because there were so many bumps in the camera as the cameraman was walking along, that's taken out a whole load of motion. Okay, so let's export out our data now. Cool. All right, and let's turn the animation off here and turn my Uber key on, because what I don't want to be doing now is I don't want to be messing around and creating loads and loads of little keyframes throughout here. So I just want to make sure that whatever I do is going to stay consistent for the entire thing. Actually, the final thing before we export is to look at this frame list here. I'm turning maximum smoothing off and turning my number of frames down fairly low to 5. So this is pretty good. It's keeping everything nice and steady. But actually, as you can see, to get this looking good when we take it into our compositing app, we're going to have to scale things up, and we're going to scale things up a huge amount to try and get rid of these black lines here, or the black borders here. So this is actually far too high. So what I want to do is actually, instead of doing a complete stabilize as we have here, just come in and try and incorporate some of those larger camera moves going in. And to do that, we're going to create a fixed frame list. So I'm going to hit plus on my first frame just to start us off. And then I'm going to come to a frame where everything's looking fairly sort of ropey, and where there's quite a large black border going along there. And I'm just going to hit plus on that, and let's just see what happens. It's put that down in my frame list here. And what's happened is it kind of smooths out the stabilize information with the frame list here. So the frame 23 is going to be our full frame again, our original frame again. So if we do that again, where things start going a little bit too far out of hand, we add just a few frames to our frame list. This is going to reincorporate some of the original camera movement in, and things aren't going to get out of hand as they would do before. So we're still a lot steadier than we were before, but we don't have that same sort of crazy end result where we have a sort of postage stamp of an image left that we have to zoom up. Cool, I can handle that. Let's stop that for a second, and let's export these. And I'm going to export these to a number of different apps so you can see the various ways of dealing with them. So let's export out our stabilized tracking data now, and we'll look at Nuke again first. And we can do this again in one of either two ways. We can take it out as the tracking data or as the corner pin, Now we've seen the corner pin, we'll just copy that to the clipboard, and it will quickly analyze the motion out and copy that data to our clipboard. Cool, and let's pop into new. And we've seen how we deal with corner pin data. We can just select our layer, background layer here, Control V, Apple V, and that pastes in our corner pin data. Now the cool thing about using the corner pin data is we get to use the full stabilizer. So that's X, Y translation, rotation, the shear, and the perspective. Let's take it out again, and this time instead of taking it out as corner pin, we're going to take it out as ASCII, and we'll save that into our basic stabilize here, and let's call this surfboard track. Let's take a little look at this one. We're going to add a tracker and do the same as we did before. So we'll come into our tracker and we'll enable all 4 trackers here. Come in and import the ASCII. And we'll find it here in basic stabilize, tracker 1. Okay. Tracker 2. 3. And finally number 4. Cool, and in this case here, we're going to come to our transform. Oh, actually, we can see, before I do any of that, let's turn on the transform that's going to be using. And we can come in and we can go to our transform up here. Turn on our stabilize. Let's see what that's doing. And that stabilized that all up quite nicely. Cool, happy with that. And let's do a compare to see how different these two are. Just do a difference. And you can see that there are points where of crossover where everything's working out just fine. And those are our reference frames. Let's see what happens when I turn on the rotation and scale as well. Not a big difference. But we could add those in there to our tracker, to our regular sort of to our tracker there instead. And let's actually get rid of that there. Cool. All right. So back in Mocha Pro again. Let's take out the transform data to After Effects this time. Now After Effects is going to be a little bit different because if we want to take out the shear here, we can't actually use the transform data one here because that's not going to take out the I'll show you actually After Effects transform data. Let's copy that to the clipboard. And in After Effects now, let's just come in. We've got the data in the clipboard, so we'll just Apple V, Control V to paste that in. Hit on U just to check out which keyframes we've got, and we've got position, scale, and rotation keyframes. So we don't have those distortion keyframes that we had before. So you can see it's doing a slap-up job, but it's ignoring the shear and the perspective. So if we want those, we'll have to come in and use the corner pin. Copy that to the clipboard. Come in here. I'll create another copy of this. And now let's come in and paste. Whoops. Let's come to our first frame, of course, and paste in that data. paste in that data, and now we have our corner pin, position, scale and rotation. Let's take a little look at what that does. Well, we know what it's going to do. It's going to give us the all of the stabilization for the transformation stuff, and it's also going to give us the stabilization for the distortion stuff. Let's check out the difference between those two. On the first frame, there should be no difference. And then we can see exactly what it's doing. Cool. Okay. Okay, so let's just export this out just a couple more times. Just want to show you how sort of a range of how you bring this in. If we take this into Final Cut Pro, all we have to do is import the XMLs we did before, and that that basically gives you the. Well, let's show that actually. Let's save this. Surfboard track FCP. And let's import that XML. There we go, surfboard track. Let's do OK and everything there. Drop it down to the timeline. And it plays it back nice and smooth. So let's have a look at what that's doing in the motion tab. Here we go, we've got all of this stuff going on. And keyframe set for basically everything with the scale and all of that. Okay, now the problem comes here is how are we going to get rid of the black borders around here? Now we can't scale it up because each frame has a scale keyframe on it. So that's not going to help us, that's not going to do anything. We could try to come in and go to perspective and add a basic 3D here. Come in and try and scale it up here, but that's still not going to work. Let's have a look why. Because the filters get processed before the basic motion does. So it's scaling up our image and then doing the rest of the transform on it. So basic 3D is not going to help us. Now, one way we can do it here is to come into sequence and go nest items. And what this is going to do is just going to bounce down. Let's just give that a shorter name. It's going to bounce down that particular clip we have selected into its own sequence. And we can double click on that to open up the sequence and play around with it if we need to. But now it's in its own sequence, we can get this into the viewer here, come in and apply an overall scale to it. And that will take out the black borders. Bit of a roundabout way of working it, to be absolutely fair. So here's another way of doing it if you want to work in Final Cut. And that's not exporting to Final Cut at all. That's exporting to Motion instead. So we've seen what the corner pin is going to do. Let's try and have a look at what Motion Basic Transform is going to do. So let's save this out. Surfboard track, and this is motion. Okay, so the export should have finished by now, so I'm going to import directly the motion project into Final Cut. Drop that in here, and it's going to look a little bit weird. I'm going to say a little bit weird, a lot weird. Make that shorter. Now the cool thing is I can just come in and open in editor. It'll probably ask you if you want to update this from an earlier version. So we can open the original here, and it's just going to save it over with the current version of Motion that we're working with. Okay, so we just play this back in Motion here. You can see we've got our clip that's a little bit too long still. Come back and we'll set our project length there. Let's fit this in the window as well. And I'm going to hit F5 to bring up my project palette over here. Cool, and we can see we've got two things in here. We've got the surface that has all the transform data on. We have our base clip, which is our video, and we need to link those two together. Easy as pie. Let's come in, select our base clip, go to add behavior, motion tracking, match move, drag the surface over the top there, hit play, job done. We now come into our base clip over here, into the inspector, and happily scale this up. So we've now got our stabilized shot. I'm going to hit save on this here, jump straight back into Final Cut, and now without doing anything else, this clip is now updated. So all I have to do is render out this clip if it needs rendering. Let's get rid of that clip. So render out this clip here. And we now have our stabilize done, and we've managed to scale up the borders in motion and then use that data in Final Cut. So that works out really well. So that's the basic use of the stabilize tab right there. In the next exercise, we're going to go along and get into slightly more of the features that we can do with the stabilize tab using the borders, autofill, and region. So this is stuff if we want to do our rendering directly within Mocha Pro, and this is going to open up some new opportunities for us. All right, I will see you in the next exercise.